Make sure you never miss an FX Medicine episode by subscribing to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram.
Welcome to FX Medicine, bringing you the latest in evidence-based, integrative, functional and complementary medicine. I'm Dr. Michelle Woolhouse. FX Medicine acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, where we live and work, and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to the elders, past and present, and extend this respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. A few months ago, I did an interview with Professor Marc Cohen on some of the most researched wellness hacks that are effective, evidence-based, enjoyable, social and affordable. It was such a pleasure to have Marc on the show, as he's a wealth of knowledge and a world leader in this space. So I invited him back to finish asking him all of the questions that I had planned for him that first time. Professor Marc Cohen is a medical doctor, a university professor, an author, a poet, an entrepreneur, a wellness trailblazer, and a perpetual student of a life well lived. He has published more than 100 peer-reviewed scientific papers, written many books, established multiple companies, and is the current medical director of the Peninsula Hot Springs Group. On the show today, we're going to continue our conversation about the scientific validity of some of the more common wellness hacks. Welcome to FX Medicine, Marc. Thanks for being with us today.
I'm so happy to be with you again, Michelle. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, so last time we talked things like saunas and cold water therapy, Bolanotherapy was another topic. And it was so inspiring and insightful, and the research is so dense for these interventions, which blew me away. And I didn't get a chance to ask you all the questions that I had. So I'm going to start today with, I think, what you call sunshine therapy. Obviously, this is something most of us love, and we love having the sun on our back and watching a sunrise, and it's certainly essential for life and for health. But should we be more kind of explicit in our pursuit of sunshine? And what should we be looking for? What are the benefits of sunshine from a wellness perspective?
Well, the sunshine is essential for health. I mean, all life on Earth requires the sun. And for us as humans, we need sunshine to make vitamin D, which is actually not a vitamin, it's a hormone. And it's essential for so many different functions of our body, including our immune system. But so many things for calcium metabolism. And the best source of vitamin D is making it using sunshine. So we don't photosynthesize as humans, but we certainly can use light to make important molecules. And in the past, people were sun worshippers. I know even when I was a kid, it was probably not the right thing to do, but we used to just go out and sunbake and literally worshipping the sun, relying on the sun, and it's really pleasurable if you don't overdo it. However, there is the pendulum can go too far, and if you overdo sun exposure, you get sunburn, and then you get all the downside of oxidative damage in your skin, aging, wrinkles, dried skin, and more likely skin cancers. However, just exposing yourself to sun is really essential, and just to the point where your skin, it starts to feel a bit warm and a little bit sort of enjoyable. But if it gets prickly and hot, and if it starts to turn pink, that's enough. You don't need more than that.
And what about the role of sunshine on blood pressure? Because I've read some research in terms of, it promoting nitric oxide, for example, a vasodilator. And so what do we know about the use of sunshine outside of vitamin D, for example?
Well, I haven't researched specifically on blood pressure, but it makes sense. Sunshine is also another form of heat, and I'm a big fan of using heat, whether it's a sauna, a hot bath, a steam room, exercise. But you can actually just overheat your body with just the sun. So it will certainly vasodilate all the peripheral arterioles, so you get more blood going to the surface of the skin, which then flushes blood through that. And then, when you get too hot, you think you want to jump in a pool or on a beach or a river or something and cool down, and then that you get the contrast bathing effect of pushing the blood into your organs and detoxifying. So most people, and really most people in the Western world, are vitamin D deficient. And the other
Which
thing
is remarkable.
Our skin has, and I don't think we talked about this last time, but our skin has about 2 million sweat glands and many sebaceous ducts where the skin dips down and comes back up, and that's where the oils are secreted that keep your skin moist, that protect your skin from the sun, and also feed your microbiome on your skin. And if most people now, they bathe in chlorinated water, and the chlorine in water, even at 5 parts per million, will kill microorganisms, but it also oxidizes and strips off the natural oils on our skin, which makes us more prone to wrinkled skin, aging skin, sun-damaged skin, and skin cancer. So, the sun can be damaging. If you strip off the protective layer of your skin by, bathing in chlorinated water, so you've got those oils aren't there, so your skin can't stay as moist, it doesn't have that sun protection, and then you overexpose yourself to sun, it can be damaging. So it's a combination of having the right level of exposure to the sun, but also having your skin in a state. And the other really good thing about the thing you can do to help prevent sunburn and protect your skin from the sun is having carotenoids in your diet. And that's, all the red, orange, yellow vegetables and fruits that have, beta-carotene, lutein, zeaxanthin. And they give your skin a natural orange glow, but they're fat-soluble antioxidants that act as a natural sunscreen. So having an orange glow from having lots of vegetables, and we don't have, if you have too much carrot juice or something, you can turn orange, which is not dangerous, but it's can be a bit
it just looks funny, like a lot of fake tan, really.
Well, in fact, they use that as fake tans. They use carotenoids as part of the fake tan, and it's a natural thing to have an orange glow. And actually, in clinical practice, if you stretch someone's palm open. And when you can look for anemia in the skin creases, but you also look for a yellow tinge, and it's a rough clinical marker of how much vegetables they eat. And often you see vegetarians having a bit more of an orangey tint to their skin than people who don't eat lots of vegetables, because the carotenoids aren't in that surface layer of fat, and those carotenoids, that orange tinge, actually is protective against the sun.
I was recently having a chat to Dr. Joanna McMillan talking about extra virgin olive oil, and she was talking about the latest research of when you heat extra virgin olive oil and mix that with vegetables, new phytonutrients are created, a little like we, touched upon in the last episode regarding kombucha. But I wanted to do a little bit more of a deep dive into kombucha and live ferments and the history of them and why we should, be using them, and can we overdo it? So I know I've just asked a whole raft of different questions there, but I know that if I let you go on kombucha, you're just going to, it's a very exciting topic for you. So tell us about kombucha.
Now. I've been really diving to ferments, because fermentation is basically a process where you get a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. So it's actually an ecosystem, and this is a very primitive, you've got prokaryotes and then the eukaryotes, the yeast and the bacteria that work together. And the yeast takes sugars and carbohydrates, but usually simple sugars, and ferments that to alcohol. And then the bacteria takes the alcohol and ferments that to organic acids. And essentially that makes vinegar, acetic acid, or acetobacter makes acetic acid. There's also gluconobacter, which makes gluconic acid, and glucuronic acid, which sort of aren't as sharp and spiky. Yeah, so good for the liver, and they taste a bit sweet and tart rather than sharp and spiky like acetic acid. They're super good for you. And if you go back to the history of kombucha, or actually most people know vinegar, white wine vinegar from wine, and apple cider vinegar, which is from apples. And both apples and grapes are very high in polyphenols, resveratrol and all these other polyphenols. But one of the highest sources of polyphenols is tea, and green tea actually has more polyphenols than grapes or apples. But tea doesn't have the sugars, whereas grapes and apples have the sugars that ferment naturally. Tea you have to sweeten. And the first tea ferments were probably fermented with honey, and that's called Jun, Jun.
Right.
And our sort of Neolithic ancestors would have made some tea and put some honey in it and then let it sit, and notice it went fizzy and a bit sparkly and a little bit alcoholic and delicious. And Jun is an amazing drink. You can ferment that at home just with honey and tea. And then when sugar became available, tea with sugar, like sweet tea fermented, is kombucha.
Right.
And both kombucha and Jun, because they're fermented tea, they have all the polyphenol benefits of tea as well as all the benefits of the ferment. And in that fermentation, the bacteria needs to make their own nutrients. So they make things like B12 and biotin and even their own polyphenols. So we did some research recently where we were interested in all the different organisms in a kombucha blend, and in a particular one that I'm involved with. My business partner and friend has the Good Brew Kombucha Company, and we use that as a base for making vinegars. And we did a metagenomics study, and we found out that he uses a wild ferment, which means he's been cultivating this ferment for about 12 years, just with organic sugar and tea and Dalesford spring water, and he has 200 probiotic strains there. And we didn't realise it because in the literature they say, there's about 5 different strains or 11 different strains, but he had 200. So it's a whole ecosystem. And that's...
It's like drinking a forest.
Yeah, that's right. It's like having a whole forest rather than having a monoculture of one. And often, the commercial companies, what they'll do is they'll lab grow a lactobacillus or a particular organism, and then they'll add that to vinegar and tea extract, and they'll call it kombucha, and there'll be a certain amount of cultures, live cultures at the time of bottling, but it's like adding a monoculture, and then that doesn't survive that well. Whereas if you add a wild ferment, and the best wild ferment is you can do that at home. But you can make your own kombucha at home. And in fact, our vinegars are a starter culture. So if you just take a little bit of our vinegar, or if you've got someone else with a bit of kombucha vinegar or some SCOBY, you add about 5 times the quantity of sweet tea and keep it in a warm place open to the air and wait a week and it'll start fermenting. And then once it's fermented to vinegar, maybe a week or 10 days, depending on the temperature, you can 5 times it again. And you can 5 times it again. So even from a little 40 ml jar, you can create hundreds of litres of kombucha from that forever if you wanted to. So it really is a prolific process. The benefits for your health are just, we're still exploring that. So we published the first ever human clinical trial of kombucha earlier this year.
And what did you study? Did you study it on gut health or further afield?
We did it on glycemic control. So we went to Jenny Brand Miller's lab, which is the sugars lab at the University of Sydney, and that's where they really invented glycemic index. So they're very expert on measuring blood sugar after meals and insulin response after meals. And we compared kombucha with a meal with a standard was jasmine rice and peas. So having a glass of kombucha with the meal compared to soda water or diet soft drink, which were the controls. And the diet soft drink had the same pH as the kombucha, so it wasn't just about the acid content, it was about something in the kombucha. And we found out, and this was in healthy adults, it was just a single dose. It wasn't ongoing, just 1 serve of kombucha, 1 meal, measuring sugar and insulin afterwards. And we found out compared to the diet soft drink or the soda water, if you drank the kombucha, you had a 20% reduction in the glucose spike and a 15% reduction in the insulin spike after the meal, which is
that's
highly
so good for inflammation and all of those, adiposity.
There's so many things. And glucose spikes, they're relevant, super relevant for people with metabolic syndrome or diabetes, because once you have this spike, then you have all these... it's basically like having too much sugar inside your body and it gets sticky. And you get all these glycated end products and
that's right.
Glycated hemoglobin and glycated other proteins that become unhealthy and sticky. So if you can reduce glucose spikes, you can reduce sugar cravings, you can reduce brain fog and all sorts of skin conditions, and there's a whole range of conditions that are, inflammation basically, that are promoted by that, by glucose spikes. So keeping your blood sugar regular, as a constant feed into your system is really powerful for health. And when I was talking to Jenny Brand-Miller about that, saying, why is the kombucha doing this? In fact, the kombucha we used had a little bit of sugar in it compared to the diet soft drink and the soda water, which had no sugar. And what we think is happening is we know that vinegar has an effect on blood sugar. If you have a vinegar before a meal, and that's a standard, having vinegar or salad before a meal will actually help with sugar spikes. But with the kombucha, we expect, because it's a very high polyphenol kombucha, and polyphenols slow gastric emptying. So it takes your stomach a while to work on them, and it releases slower into the intestine if you've got polyphenols. And then also, because you've got 200 strains of probiotic bacteria that are acid stable, when they hit the gut at 37 degrees and they've got carbohydrate all around them, they start metabolizing those carbohydrates. So you've got this combination of the probiotics, waking up and starting to act on the carbohydrate in your stomach, and then the slow gastric emptying, and that equates to a slow release of glucose into your system, which is ideally what you want, because then you get constant energy.
That's right. So they almost act like a fibre in some ways as well, and the combination of using them.
Well, it's similar, because your fibre will slow gastric emptying. So, same with protein and fat.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I was doing some research on metabolic syndrome, just recently, and I think some research came out of the States saying that there's only about 12% of the world has a really healthy metabolism, which is an alarming statistic.
Terrible,
it was obviously a collection of multiple different research studies, so it was an opinion of a learned group. But
so that such a small proportion of the world has good metabolism. When you follow traditional cuisines, which is different from diets, most cuisines have quite balanced. And having antipasto before a meal, or an aperitif, and digestive with bitters and stuff before a meal, or some vinegar on your salad, and some vegetables before a meal. These are standard things in a cuisine, and most cuisines also have living food as part of the cuisine.
Yes.
So there's kimchi or sauerkraut or yogurt or something that's alive on your plate that then has a probiotic effect. And we've sort of lost that. So people don't have living foods anymore. But what they do have is, have chlorine in their water, and they have antibiotics, and they have pesticides on the food, and things like glyphosate, which kill bacteria. And then they have, sanitizers and disinfectants, and we have mostly dead ferments. And if you think about most of the foods we eat are fermented, so bread and cheese and wine and beer and tea and coffee and chocolate, they're all fermented foods.
Yeah,
but they're dead ferments.
They're dead,
you don't have the living bacteria with it. So we need to add more life to our life, bringing back more living foods into our life.
Tell us about Oxymels, because obviously that's a lead on from kombucha and vinegars, and tell us about.
So I've just been on this journey of discovery into honey. So I've just been talking to. There's an amazing company out. I'm up in Byron Bay at the moment, and there's an amazing company called Gather By, which makes the world's most potent Manuka honey. And Manuka is most people think it's from New Zealand. There's actually one strain of the leptospermum bush that's in New Zealand, but there's more than 80 strains in Australia. It's actually an Australian native. They call it jelly bush. It's like a form of tea tree. And but they make medicinal honey forests. So they grow basically native Australian bushland. They regenerate, using regenerative agriculture to get damaged land, regrowing native Australian forests, and then they keep the bees in the one place. So they have 12 acres per beehive. So the bees are super happy, and they make this really potent Manuka honey. And I'm actually working with this company now to make a whole range of natural health products from the honey. And I've been researching it, and I didn't all this stuff they never taught us in medical school. So even the word medicine comes from the same origin as the word mead. So the original medicines were forms of honey, and there's a product called, I guess a class of products called electuaries, which I'd never heard of before. I've only found out recently. So electuaries are basically herbal infused honeys.
Right.
And these were very ancient medicines. And then Oxymels, Oxymel, is vinegar with honey and herbs as a form of medicine. Right. And we know honey and vinegar are both great preservatives, and that they become a carrier for a whole range of herbal medicines. And they're a very ancient form of medicine that we're now looking to revive. And there's also traditional Chinese formulations where they make honey pearls, which is basically honey and dried herbs, rolled up into little balls that look like, rabbit poo.
Oh,
But they're
yeah.
actually little herbal, balls or pastiles.
Yeah.
And I remember, 20 years
Certainly
ago.
great for children, isn't it? I mean, it's certainly great.
Fantastic for children.
That's so good because, it's difficult enough getting these kind of things into children, but with the sweetness.
And having complex flavours. So you can use the honey as the sweet flavour, but then you can add other herbs to make it more complex. So I'm having so much fun because I love, doing sort of witchcraft, I guess. But so I've been putting Dunaliella salina. So Dunaliella salina is the world's most salt-tolerant life form. It's a red algae that makes our lakes red, and flamingos and shrimp go red because of that. Very high form of carotenoids. So the ones I was talking about, they're in the skin. So, but it's very salty, and the Dunaliella salina, to survive in these salt lakes, it makes a lot of glycerol. So it's full of membranes and sort of fat and carotenoids, but it's very salty. So I mix that with honey, and you've got concentrated sugar, fat, and salt.
Oh, which is perfect. It's like a donut.
So any food scientist will say, sugar, fat, and salt.
Yeah, exactly.
Makes it addictive. But this is like the best form of sugar. So you've got all the
and the best form of salt.
The salt, and which is bioavailable, very high mineral content because it grows in seawater, and the fats and the carotenoids. So this is intensely flavourful, salty honey, but it's like you have a tiny little bit on the end of a toothpick, and it feels like you've eaten the whole donut. the satisfaction it gives you.
Okay. And then, I think we're off to the sugar lab again.
And then doing making bitter honey and sour honey, so with different herbs. So it's never ending is what you can do as a carry-up.
It's so exciting, isn't it?
Honey.
Yeah.
And then there's switchels. So a switchel is a traditional drink. So that's a drink with vinegar, water, usually a pinch of salt, and honey or molasses. And this was the original rehydration drink. So the Roman army used to drink vinegar and water to keep them hydrated. And in the cotton fields in America, in the heat, they used to use that as a rehydration. And I think the vinegar helps keep the water safe because the vinegar can, protect against pathogens, but having vinegar in your water, it's got a whole lot of electrolytes and other minerals there that the water doesn't, so it's actually more rehydrating than water alone.
And I remember in medical school when, you just give water alone, often the water would, if the person was severely dehydrated, it wouldn't actually be able to get into the crypts to be able to hydrate quickly. Yeah.
That's right. So you want something that's going to be absorbed by the body, and adding a dash of vinegar to your water, and just putting a dash of vinegar into your water bottle and drinking that throughout the day, or a splash of vinegar before a meal is such an easy thing to do. And if it's a living vinegar, like the kombucha vinegars we make, which are they're literally extremely alive. That's our brand name, but they are extremely alive. It's such an easy way to add
flavor,
living food to your diet, but also balancing your sugar and adding, having vinegar as part of your diet.
So we're going to move on to detoxification, because I know you've done a lot of research in detoxification, and it is a bit of a buzzword, influences, and it kind of gets a little bit, I guess, demeaned, through some of the hype around it. But obviously, throughout history, people have used detoxification, like, for example, in Ayurveda, they use panchakarma, which is a 49-day ancient, technique with so much tradition and so much wisdom in it. What can we learn? Like, do you still use the word detoxification process? Like,
Absolutely.
I know for you it's like, let's detox all the time, etc. Like, tell us, exactly.
Because we're toxifying ourselves all the time. I mean, and being in the modern world, we're keeping inventing new toxicants and new forms of toxicity. There's literally millions of different chemicals that we're producing, now that were never produced, 50 years ago, that we're exposed to. And Ayurveda has probably the most sophisticated detoxification regimens, through Panchakarma and through getting rid of a lot of the fat-soluble toxicants, because we don't normally excrete fat. Fat's really hard won. You want to you use fat to store things. And there is a theory that, or there's a policy in public health. They say the solution to pollution is dilution. They talk about it with the public health, putting waste into the oceans or the air and diluting the waste out.
Yes.
We're paying the price of that now because there's no more sinks to put out pollution. But in our bodies, if you have fat-soluble toxins in your body, one of the body's strategies is to dilute them by having more fat.
Yeah.
So you store the toxic substances away in the fat, and then by putting on more fat, it sort of keeps it out of harm's way and keeps the toxicants from affecting your organs. But that means you become obese, and part of the obesity epidemic is related to chemicals which we call obesogens, which are these toxic chemicals that cause us to put on fat. So people look at the obesity epidemic, and it's 2/3 of Australians. I think we compete with America each year to be the fattest nation on earth.
Yeah.
And we're priming ourselves with these toxic chemicals that literally, there are obesogens, there are diabesogens, which makes us more diabetic. And these are chemicals that we need to get out of our body. And we've been studying a lot of Ayurvedic wisdom. And in fact, just to arc back a little bit, Ayurveda has this incredible product they call Shaman Prash. So Shaman Prash is a 5,000-year-old herbal formula with 50 different herbs. So it's really complex, but it's based in honey and ghee. So they mix honey and ghee with 50 different herbs, and it's like an Indian health jam. So it's got all the different flavours. It's sweet, it's salty, it's spicy, it's sour, it's bitter. It's mostly made from amla, which is one of the highest sources of vitamin C, although Kakadu plum is notably higher. But they use that as a health jam, as a general tonic for the body. And there's a lot of general lifestyle recommendations that I always recommend that actually are detoxifying. So whether it's Tulsi tea, having filtered water. I mean, first of all, you want to stop putting the toxic stuff in your body. So having filtered water is sort of a no-brainer, and having, organic food where you can. I have this theory that's it's hard to prove it, but I have this theory that eating less poison is good for you. So, which sounds ridiculous.
So wild.
It's not been proven, but because it's hard actually to prove that. But,
I know.
It sounds obvious that it's good to drink less poison. And the old saying is, if you don't use a filter, you are a filter. If you don't filter the stuff out first, it's going to end up in your body.
Yeah.
So first of all, having good food and good water, but then things like Tulsi tea. So Tulsi tea is a great detoxification agent, and a lot of adaptogenic herbs. Partially, the way they make you adapt to stress is by reducing your toxic load. And once your toxic load is reduced, your body functions better.
Right.
And even saunas and sweating, that part of the benefits of sweating is you detoxify through your sweat. And one of my students, Joy Hussain, she just finished her PhD on saunas, and one of her final research projects was measuring pesticides in sweat. And of course, they're there. Although they're the organophosphate pesticides, which are sort of the nerve agents. They were designed off nerve gas. And they're water soluble, so you can pee them out. And about 10 years ago, one of my other students, Lisa Oates, and I did some research. We showed if you have an organic, 80% organic diet for 1 week, you'll drop your organophosphate load in your urine by 90%.
Yeah.
And that's because they're water soluble and you pee them out. So it's never too late. You start an organic diet. A week later, you'll have a 90% reduced organophosphate load. But the thing is, even though they're water soluble and you pee them out, most people eat them every day, so they're pseudo-persistent.
Right.
But there's another class of pesticides, which are the older class, which are the organochlorines, and that includes DDT. But also, there's a lot of fat-soluble or lipophilic toxic chemicals in the environment. So it's from dioxins and PCP and PFAS and all these, all the perfluorinated compounds, and they're really hard to excrete. So you need a whole other strategy for getting the toxicity out of our fat.
Yeah.
And in Panchakarma, they do things like a little bit diluting it. So they give you, lots of oil to drink and oil massages and oil enemas.
Yes.
So they flush the oil through your body. So it's basically giving your body an oil change. And just like your car, just like your car has dirty oil that needs to be changed, your body has oils that go rancid.
Oh my
and they get
God, I love
toxicity
it.
built up in them. So it's good to give your body an oil change too, with all the healthy fats.
So I mean, oil is just such an amazing thing. We started off talking about that change of extra virgin olive oil and how it actually changes and sort of absorbs the phytonutrients and stuff. But I mean, I've always been really fascinated by mushrooms. And, they're almost like a class on their own between animals and vegetables.
They are. They're more animal than plants, yeah.
Yeah. And so I want to talk about mushrooms because they've got such a historical usage and such a medicinal usage. But the research is coming in thick and fast. And I know you've got a special interest in mushrooms. And they're also so good for detoxification from what I have known and used in clinic. So mushrooms, what do we need to know from a kind of wellness hack perspective?
Oh, get the menu. There were so many different mushrooms. In fact, yesterday I caught up with Mason from Superfeast. He made Mason's mushrooms. He's got this whole mushroom company. And I'm going to be working with him, and we're going to do mushrooms and honey and all sorts of stuff. So there is many different kinds of mushrooms. Some people think it's just the button mushrooms, or the Swiss browns, or the magic mushrooms. It's the psychedelics. But there's hundreds of different species of mushrooms. Many of them edible. And then there's all medicinal mushrooms like cordyceps and reishi and lion's mane and turkey tail and shiitake and maitake, and there's all these wonderful medicinal mushrooms which also have really broad properties in terms of gut health, and the beta glycans in the mushrooms are really good for your gut, so that they'll act as a prebiotic and they're good for digestion. But there are so many. Cordyceps is great for oxygen carrying capacity, so for athletes or an immune system. Reishi is great for the immunity. I mean, all mushrooms are really good for the immune system. Turkey tail has anti-cancer benefits. About 10 years ago, I was really fortunate. I was up here in Byron Bay at the Uplift Festival, and I got to spend a week, actually more, about nearly 2 weeks with Paul Stamets, who he made that movie Fantastic Fungi with another friend of mine, Louis Schwartzberg.
Yeah. That's where I knew that name.
So Paul Stamets is one of the top, mycologists in the world, and got to hang out with him. And then he gave me a whole lot of his mushrooms at the time because he wasn't able to sell them in Australia because they weren't TGA approved, and he wasn't didn't want to take them back to America. He brought a whole lot with him, so he gifted me all these mushroom tinctures, which I took for the next couple of years and gave out to some friends. And but so it's really hard to summarise mushroom. It's like saying, tell me about herbal medicine.
Yeah, no.
You could write books about it. But mushrooms are fantastic for your diet. Just to include, there are some novel, and there's sort of TGAs working out, novel foods like lion's mane mushroom. And there's a native form of lion's mane, which is great for brain health. It looks a little bit like a brain if you look at the lion's mane. They're beautiful looking mushrooms. Yeah. But you can actually have them fresh, and you can just cook them up, just fry them up and as a sort of protein substitute. You can have them dried and ground and have them as a powder. And we put mushrooms in all our extremely low vinegar. So we use leaves, roots, flowers, fruits, and fungi. So we use a lot of lion's mane and turkey tail and maitake and shiitake and reishi in our different blends. And Superfeast, that's Mason's company. They have an amazing range of coffee substitutes, drinks that you can make with mushrooms. And the Chinese medicine has a really rich history of mushroom products. A lot of the mushrooms are grown in China now and wild harvested there. And, they've got a very sophisticated, I think the Indians, Ayurvedic medicine has the most sophisticated sort of food and herbs and spices. And then from that we get Chyawanprash, which is this incredible health jam. And the Chinese have the incredible pharmacopoeia of herbal substances, from nature. And from them we get a lot of the benefits of mushrooms and a lot of the history and the uses of medicinal mushrooms comes from within Chinese medicine. Mushrooms also have different parts because there's mycelial network, which is under the ground, and there's the fruiting body, which is above the ground. and they're both good. They've both got different uses, and often I think about, if you think about your gut as being soil, and the villi that lines your intestine are the roots that go down into the soil. You want to feed your soil good compost. You want to keep biomass there. So keeping organic material, high quality, what you call prebiotics and fibre, but also a variety of living organisms into your gut is really important. And that's, if you want to improve the soil of your garden, you add living compost.
Yeah, that's
living
right.
biomass, and it's the same with your gut. You need good quality living biomass to support your gut health, and mushrooms are really good for that. Just like mushroom compost is great for your garden.
Yeah, that's right.
Mushrooms are great for your gut.
In your opinion, because you talk a lot about sort of fasting and feasting from a historical perspective as well, what do you think is the main benefits, in terms of detoxification, and what do you mean by a fast when you say fasting, and what do you mean by a feast?
So there's different levels of fasting. I mean, because everybody fasts usually every
night.
Yeah,
of course.
You fast overnight.
Well, you'd hope so.
And you break your fast. And I'm a big fan of intermittent fasting, which means just extending your fast overnight and waiting till you're actually hungry before you eat. And you end up training your gut microbiome, and you think you're in control of your diet and the foods you want and the foods you crave, but very often it's the little bacteria in your gut that are talking to your brain, and the gut-brain axis is really huge. There's more nerves going from your gut to your brain than from your brain to your gut.
Yes.
And it's often your gut's telling your brain what to eat, and you need to train your gut. So extending that fast overnight and then waiting till you're hungry before you eat, and then realising that the feast is in the first bite. When you break your fast, that first bite of whatever you're going to eat, and it's great to have something like a vinegar hit, or fibre, or starting off with savoury
mushrooms.
Mushrooms, absolutely. Starting the day with mushrooms, or something that's not going to just spike your blood sugar. So having protein, fat, and fibre. That feast in the first bite is a really great concept, because it's the first bit of chocolate cake where you get the benefit. It's not the 10th. So
you'll have people arguing with you on that one, but yeah, I agree.
Well, then not the 100th. By the time you get to the 100th bit, exactly. it's an effort. But that first bite where your taste buds are getting exploding into flavour, and you're really enjoying that, breaking that fast and satisfying your hunger, relishing that every day. So, being hungry every day and then breaking that fast and realising just how wonderful it is to be able to have amazing food to eat. So that's the short answer of fasting every day. But then there are benefits for extended fasts, which sort of gives your whole immune system a reset.
Yes.
Although I think before you do extended fasts, you want to have some sort of experience or supervision and having an aim for what you're doing.
Yeah.
And because people get quite radical with their fast, but they do just a water fast or a juice fast or all these sort of things. And, I'm not that big into dietary fads and just things that you can't maintain as part of your life. So it's easy to maintain, fasting overnight, extending that fast into the next day, and then breaking your fast with something delicious and feasting that first bite. Whereas, doing a 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10-day fast, that needs some supervision, and you want to have an objective. Why are you doing that? So we know our ancestors. I mean, they didn't eat, feast every single day. They would have had periods of fasting, and when you do fast, and the research is showing this, you get like a whole immune system reset. You get apoptosis and autophagy. So apoptosis is recycling old cellular equipment. So the proteins that have gone past their use by date and they've become misfolded, they get broken down and turned back into amino acids and get rebuilt. So that's sort of recycling your cellular machinery. And then apoptosis, that's autophagy. So apoptosis is programmed cell death, where the cells that are getting to the end of their useful life, or they're a bit aberrant, or they're misformed, or they've got some damage to them, die, and they get reabsorbed, and their contents gets reused for other things.
Yeah, it's
and
like
that's
a
really
clean-up
good
job.
process.
Yeah, it's a big declutter, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a spring clean for your cells.
Which is, I think for people, if they can get into a rhythm of that, maybe even throughout the year, like we do a cleaning process or a deep dive in terms of maintaining our car, or it's those kind of rhythms, that we're after of, like, you talk about a daily cycle, but, a yearly cycle or
That's right. And I think
something.
most people, we're out of that yearly cycle because we have fresh food all year round. Fruits are all year round and vegetables are all year round. Whereas if we start eating with the seasons, there is a season for, putting on, having roast vegetables and big soups, and then, having a bit of, and often the fast would happen at the end of winter before spring, just before the shoots come out, where, the fresh food's not as available. So you have your little fast then, and then springtime, then you have all the new green shoots and the young vegetables and things with full of phytonutrients, and then you start, regenerating, rebuilding again.
Yeah, how nice. What a fantastic conversation, Marc. It's so, we always talk about, how hard it is to be healthy, or it requires a sacrifice, or that it's a lot of hard work. There's always that kind of, narrative that sort of goes around that. But your wellness hacks, through your inspiration, and you're clearly obvious, so excited about it. It can become, when we put this into our daily life, into our daily philosophy, it really is a pursuit of enjoyment. That's so
right. It should be joyful to be healthy.
Yes.
Not a burden. It should be easy. But then adding just things into your life, whether it's fasting overnight, whether having, living foods or vinegars into your routine, or having, health jams,
Oxymels,
or mushrooms, Oxymels, and you can do all these things at home. I mean, to make sauerkraut at home, it's cheap and
fun.
Easy.
It's fun.
And it's really fun.
It's good for anger management, I found, when I smashing
up our cabbage.
It's beautiful.
But then also what happens is your kitchen becomes coated with good bacteria. So just by making sauerkraut, you actually change the bacterial content of your home.
That's
so it's a really good thing to do, and
it's amazing.
Yeah, I encourage people to make food. I mean, our ancestors would have done. It was just part of the course to preserving food. But it's also delicious, and it bioactivates the food. So fermented foods are more nutritious than unfermented foods because the bacteria and yeast have their process where they make more nutrients.
Yeah, and the more nutrients we have, the more we can use it for detoxification, which is, so we've got energy production, we've got immune support, we've got detoxification, we've got to use all these nutrients for all these things. So it makes sense, the more we have, the more benefit that we can receive. So I wanted to finish, you have another poem for us, because that was a highlight on the last podcast.
Yeah, I've got many poems. I think I didn't share that, just it's probably one of the most simple ones, which is what I call the recipe for wellness.
Great.
And it's super simple. It says, bathe in beautiful water, prepare delicious food, make the most of every breath, dance through every mood, tend the soil beneath your feet, embrace sunshine from above, share your gifts with all the world, and fill your life with love.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
I think we touched on quite a few of those things. We talked about water, we talked about preparing food, and I think preparing delicious food is even better than eating delicious food.
Yeah,
because it means if you prepare, you're going to eat it anyway, but it means you're in service, you're touching the food, you're preparing it, even whether it's you're growing it yourself or getting the ingredients and going to the markets, and then that preparation process is like a meditation of wellness and enjoyment, and then you're in service and you give it to other people. So I think the whole food service, we've done ourselves a disservice with fast foods and processed foods and packaged foods, and we've missed out on that whole preparation. And I'll say just making sauerkraut's a health process.
Oh, yeah, and it's really fun, and also learning something new as well. Like, I mean, I can't stick to a recipe. I just have to change them up, which is creative, as well. Like, I take a recipe and then I'll merge it and make it my own. But that's my little...
Yeah, I mean, I'm like you. I love learning, and I'm just diving deep into learning about bees right now, and medicinal honey forests, and how to make bees happy, and how they can make us happy with their honey, and what you can do with honey. Right. So Oxymels and switchels and electuaries, and these.
Oh, there's so much. We're going to have to do part 3.
Yeah, but I think they're also going to be the modern medicines as well, once we start putting science behind it. So I'm working with Southern Cross Union there up in Lismore to do some science around all this as well. So yeah, lots of fun to be had.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your research, wisdom, approach, philosophy, insight. It was a real honour to chat to you today.
It's always a pleasure, Michelle. And I think we've known each other 20 plus years and always learning, yeah.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, all the best.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening today. Don't forget that you can find all the show notes, transcripts, and other resources from today's episode on the FX Medicine website. I'm Dr. Michelle Woolhouse, and thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
This podcast is intended as healthcare practitioner education only, and it is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to FX Medicine. And share us with your family, friends, and colleagues.